The letter arrived on a morning that began with laughter, and ended with ruin. It came to Grosvenor Square wrapped in the seal of St. James's Palace, carried by a young footman who bowed so deeply his cap brushed the frost-dusted stones. Inside Lady Harcourt's drawing-room, the fire burned bright, its warmth mingling with the perfume of orange blossoms and the tinkle of porcelain cups. Society ladies chattered, the way only the secure can chatter, their words light as spun sugar and just as cutting. At the center of it all sat Lady Isabella Harcourt, once the toast of every London season, now the quiet ornament of her father's failing fortune. Her hands, slender and still gloved despite the fire's heat, trembled as she lifted her teacup. The conversation swirled around her like smoke. Someone was recounting the scandal of Lord Ambrose's daughter running off with a painter, another laughed at the memory of Isabella's former betrothal, the Duke of Ashworth, the soldier who had never returned. "Oh, but she does dress beautifully for a widow without a husband," one lady whispered behind her fan. "She isn't a widow," another replied, loud enough to carry. "One must first be wed to earn the dignity of mourning." The laughter that followed was sharp, bright, and cruel. Isabella's lips pressed together until the color left them. The world seemed to shrink into that sound, the bright mockery of women who had once envied her and now found pleasure in her decay. She rose gracefully, murmured some excuse about the chill, and crossed to the window, where her reflection stared back pale against the grey London light. She had been 17 when she promised her heart to the Duke of Ashworth, Edward Harrow, before he sailed with Wellington's men to Spain. His letters had come faithfully for months, written in a hand both strong and tender, the ink blotched where rain or perhaps tears had fallen. Then, one day they stopped. Rumors spread that he had died in the siege of Badajoz. The War Office confirmed nothing, silence confirmed everything. For 3 years she wore his ring, until her father insisted she put it away. Now she existed in a kind of suspended grief, neither maiden nor widow, merely a reminder of what love once promised and the world forgot. The door opened. The Harcourt butler, an old man with rheumy eyes, entered and bowed. "A letter, my lady." "From the palace." Conversation ceased. Every jeweled head turned. Isabella took the envelope, feeling the weight of the wax seal, deep red, stamped with the royal crest. For one foolish heartbeat, she thought it might be news from Edward, some impossible correction to history, a single line declaring, "I live." But when she broke the seal, her gaze met elegant black script. "By order of His Majesty King George III, Lady Isabella Harcourt is cordially invited to attend the royal ball in celebration of His Majesty's improving health." There was nothing more. No note of favor, no personal message. Only duty, decoration, and public display. "How fitting," Lady Hensley murmured from the settee. "The poor dear will have to dance alone." The laughter returned, lighter now, disguised as sympathy. Isabella's throat tightened. She folded the invitation neatly, as though precision could shield her from pity, and turned to her guests with a smile that cost her more than any jewel she owned. "I am most honored," she said softly. "Please, do continue." But inside, something cracked. That evening, after the carriages had gone and the servants' footsteps faded, Isabella sat before her dressing mirror. The candlelight trembled against the glass, throwing her reflection into shifting gold. The face that looked back was beautiful still, but hollowed, a beauty learned too well, preserved like a portrait rather than lived. Her hair, once a banner of pride, had lost its sheen. Her eyes, once full of laughter, carried the calm of someone who has learned not to expect joy. Her maid, Alice, approached with gentle hesitation. "My lady, shall I prepare your gown for the ball?" Isabella's gaze did not leave the mirror. "Yes," she said after a moment. "Something pale. Modest. Not black." "No," Isabella murmured. "I have mourned long enough for a man the world insists is dead." Alice paused, unsure whether to speak. "They say, my lady, the Duke?" "Do not." Isabella's tone cut through the quiet like the edge of a blade. "Do not speak his name." But even as she said it, she felt the old ache flare again. His name lived beneath her skin. She could no more silence it than she could stop her own heart. Outside, the wind howled down the chimneys, rattling the windows like a restless spirit. Isabella drew the curtains shut, but the noise persisted, a reminder that the world beyond her walls still moved, still changed, still forgot her. She tried to read. She tried to pray. In the end, she simply sat at her writing desk, staring at the invitation until the letters blurred. She wanted to burn it. She wanted to go. She wanted, above all, to stop wanting anything. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere far off, church bells echoed across the city. When sleep came, it was shallow and strange. She dreamed of him, not as he had been, proud and laughing, but as she had last imagined him, fallen on some foreign field, his hand clutching the locket she had given him. She woke with tears on her cheeks and a name on her lip. Morning broke pale and cold. The city moved on as it always did, unmoved by the griefs of one forgotten woman. Isabella dressed in silence, her every motion deliberate. As she descended the staircase, her father appeared from his study, a figure stooped by debt and disappointment. "You will attend the ball," he said without greeting. "It would be unwise to decline a royal summons." "I understand." He hesitated, searching her face for something. Perhaps for the girl she had once been. "You must remember, Isabella, society forgets those who disappear too long." She almost smiled. "Then let society remember my absence as they please. I have nothing left to offer them but silence." Yet that afternoon, as she walked through the garden, the roses brittle, the sky heavy with snow, something in the air shifted. The gatekeeper ran toward her, breathless, holding a folded newspaper. "My lady, it's the news from Spain." She took it, scarcely breathing. The headline leapt at her like a ghost. "Reports confirm survival of the Duke of Ashworth. Returning to London within the fortnight." The world tilted. The garden blurred. For a moment she thought she would fall, but the bench was there, cold beneath her hand. Alive. After 3 years of silence. Alive. The locket she had hidden away in her jewelry box burned suddenly in memory, as if calling for her touch. That night, long after the house had gone still, Isabella stood again before her mirror, the newspaper clutched in trembling fingers. She looked at her reflection, the pale skin, the wide, uncertain eyes, and whispered to the woman who stared back. "What does one say to a ghost who returns?" The candle guttered, then went out, leaving only the echo of her question in the dark. The carriage halted before Ashworth House just as the bells of St. Paul's tolled 6, and all of London seemed to hold its breath. For 3 years, the Duke of Ashworth had been a name spoken only in elegy. Now, suddenly, he was flesh and shadow again. The city's curiosity sharpened like a blade. That morning's Gazette had already declared him, the soldier returned from the grave, and by evening, half the ton awaited his first appearance as though it were theatre. When the Duke stepped through the iron gates, the silence was profound. Those who glimpsed him later swore he looked nothing like the golden youth who had once captivated London. His hair had darkened, a faint scar traced the line of his jaw, one shoulder carried the uneven weight of injury. But his eyes, those gray, unyielding eyes, had changed most of all. They no longer sought approval. They saw and judged and remembered. Within the hour, invitations were dispatched, for no story traveled faster than the resurrection of a man once mourned. By dusk, the first of many gatherings had arranged itself in his honor. Lady Pembroke's charity gala, where London's finest would come draped in curiosity and velvet. And among them, inevitably, would be Lady Isabella Harcourt. She heard of the event at breakfast. Her father read the notice aloud with forced cheer, though the tremor in his voice betrayed unease. "It would be wise to attend, my dear. The family's presence must be seen as dutiful." "Dutiful," she repeated, tasting the word like a bitter draught. "You mean necessary." He hesitated. "You are still spoken of in connection to him, Isabella. Best to face what cannot be avoided." She said nothing. But that night, as her maid laced her gown, her hands refused to steady. Each pull of silk felt like the drawing of a blade. When she arrived, the air inside Lady Pembroke's hall throbbed with anticipation. The scent of roses and candle wax clung thickly to the heat of gossip. Conversations faltered as Isabella entered, her every step trailed by whispers. She came. She dares show her face. Does she know he will be here tonight? She met their glances with composure carved from sheer will. Her gown was modest, a pale ivory against the jeweled excess around her. Yet that restraint only made her stand out, like snow amid the riot of summer blooms. The orchestra's opening waltz began. Laughter rose, glass clinked. For a moment, she almost believed she could vanish among the crowd. And then the room shifted. He had arrived. The murmur spread like a chill. Even before she turned, she felt it, a change in the air, that particular gravity that follows the entrance of someone long imagined and finally real. The Duke of Ashworth stood near the doorway, framed by candlelight and curiosity. His posture was measured, but fatigue lingered in his stance. The left side of his coat was cut slightly broader to hide the stiffness of his arm. A faint limp, quickly mastered, betrayed an old wound. He acknowledged each bow, each curtsy, with courteous precision. When his gaze found Isabella, the room seemed to vanish. Their eyes met across the crowd, and everything that had been buried between them stirred back to life. Letters never read, promises never broken but simply starved of breath. Her fingers tightened around her fan until the ribs splintered. He began to move toward her, slowly, deliberately, as though crossing a battlefield he already knew by heart. The music faltered. Conversation died. Only the sound of his steps remained. When he reached her, he bowed, not the casual dip of society, but the full, deliberate gesture of a man paying respect to something sacred. "My lady," he said, his voice roughened by years and distance. "It has been too long." She curtsied, every nerve ablaze. "Your Grace, I had not expected—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Neither did I." The silence between them deepened, not awkward but perilous. Then, from within his coat, he withdrew a small object, a silver locket tarnished by time. He opened it in his palm. Inside lay her miniature portrait, painted years ago, the colors still bright despite the wear. "I carried this with me," he said quietly, "through every campaign. It survived storms, fire, and the loss of half my men. I thought it would not survive me. Yet here it is." The murmurs began immediately, soft, sharp, venomous. Some whispered that it was indecent to present such intimacy in public. Others sighed that it was the most romantic gesture ever made in London. Isabella's pulse thundered in her ears. She longed to flee, yet could not move. "Why would you bring this to me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because," he replied, "it never belonged to me. It was only borrowed from the life I left unfinished." Her throat tightened. The locket trembled between them like a living thing. "Then take it back," she whispered. "I have no right to what was lost." He shook his head. "Lost things are often the only ones that matter." Lady Pembroke appeared at their side, eager to dissolve the scandal. "Your Grace, such sentiment! But surely you must rest. London will have ample time to celebrate your return." He inclined his head politely, though his eyes never left Isabella's. "London may celebrate as it wishes," he said, "but I did not come back for London." The words struck like lightning, quiet but unmistakable. Isabella turned away, cheeks flushed, while the circle of onlookers hummed with delighted horror. She endured the rest of the evening in a daze, nodding through conversation she could not recall. The locket remained clutched in her hand, its metal cold against her palm. When at last she escaped to her carriage, she found her breath shaking with something she could not name: anger, relief, fear, perhaps all three braided together. At home, she dismissed Alice and locked her door. Alone, she opened the locket again. The miniature inside seemed almost to accuse her. "You waited, and yet you doubted." She pressed it to her lips before she could think better of it, then set it upon her writing desk and turned away. But sleep did not come easily. Every sound in the house seemed sharper, the creak of the stairs, the distant toll of a clock, the whisper of paper stirring in a draught. When she finally drifted toward rest, a faint knock startled her awake. She sat up, heart hammering. No one stood at the door. Only a folded envelope lay upon the floor, its seal unmarked. She broke it open with trembling fingers. Inside, in a hand she did not recognize, were 5 words written in black ink. "Do you still wait, Bella?" Her name, his name for her, used by another hand. The room seemed to sway. She read the words again, her breath catching on the edge of disbelief and dread. Somewhere in London, someone knew the secret that had belonged only to them. And in that moment, as the candle guttered low, Isabella understood that the Duke's return had awakened not only love long buried, but danger long forgotten. The letter burned in her palm like a living coal. She had read it a dozen times through the sleepless night, until the words no longer looked like ink but like wounds. "Do you still wait, Bella?" Each syllable felt stolen from the past, from a time when that name, his name for her, was a promise whispered under willow branches, not a weapon to reopen her heart. Yet the handwriting was not his. It was cruelly precise, unfamiliar, deliberate. Whoever wrote it knew exactly how to pierce her. By morning, Isabella's composure had turned to armor. She appeared at breakfast immaculate, gloved, her expression serene enough to deceive her father, who muttered distractedly over his accounts. But beneath the calm, her thoughts were a tempest. The Duke's return had already set London trembling. This letter made her wonder what else had come back from the dead with him. She told herself she would ignore it. She even tried. But when, that afternoon, a card arrived bearing the Duke's crest, inviting her to call at Ashworth House, her resolve dissolved like sugar in tea. She went. The butler's solemn face told her he had been instructed to expect her. The corridors were silent, their air faintly scented with dust and cedar polish. The war had left its mark not only on the man but on the home. Portraits veiled, flowers absent, mirrors draped as though the house itself had been in mourning. He waited for her in the library. The room was vast, lined with books that might once have been read but now served mostly to fill the silence. He stood by the hearth, one hand resting lightly on a cane, the other on a volume whose pages he did not seem to see. When she entered, he turned, and for the first time she saw the full truth of what the years had done. The Duke of Ashworth was not the man who had left her in a garden of roses 3 summers ago. His face bore the pale traces of hardship. His eyes, once bright, were shaded with the knowledge of things that did not belong in drawing-rooms. Yet when he looked at her, something gentle survived. "Lady Isabella," he said quietly, "I feared you would not come. I nearly did not." "Because of the letter?" Her breath caught. "Then you admit you sent it?" He looked startled. "I sent no letter." "Someone did," she said, withdrawing it from her reticule. "It bears your words. Or what once were your words." He took it from her, turning it over in his hand, studying the penmanship. "This is not mine. But the hand, yes, I have seen it before." His tone darkened. "In my regiment, there was a man, Captain Redgrave, he knew of you. Of us. I spoke of you when the nights grew long. I would not have imagined he'd use that knowledge." "So he lives too?" "He lives," the Duke said grimly. "And he is here in London. But I swear, Isabella, I had no part in this." She should have felt relief, but what she felt instead was a heavier confusion. "Why return now after all these years?" she asked. "Why resurrect what was allowed to die?" He smiled faintly, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Because I could not forget. Even in battle, I thought of England only as the place where you existed. When I was told you had accepted another suitor, I nearly cursed your name. But when I learned the truth, that the letters I sent were never received, anger turned to shame. I thought perhaps you had chosen silence. Yet now I see silence was chosen for you." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Someone prevented you from hearing me." I wrote every month, pleas, confessions, even one farewell. They were all returned unopened. I have the evidence still." She stared at him, the world narrowing to the space between them. "You wrote more than you could bear to read." Her hand rose to her lips. "Then who? Perhaps someone who profited from our separation. Your father, perhaps?" His tone softened. "Or another who wished to keep you bound by duty." She shook her head as if to dislodge the thought. He would not. But even as she said it, she remembered the study door locked against her inquiries, the way his gaze had turned cold whenever the Duke's name was mentioned. The silence that followed was terrible. Finally, he said, "You have suffered for what you believed. So have I. But if there is still any kindness left in your heart, grant me this: attend the king's ball. Let the world see that neither war nor gossip can erase the truth of what was once ours." She turned from him, unable to meet the earnestness in his face. "You ask too much." "I ask only what I have earned in blood and years," he replied softly. "Let them whisper. Let them scorn. I am tired of ghosts, Isabella. I came back for life." His words lingered in the air long after she left. Outside, the sky hung low and gray. She walked through the square without feeling the chill, the letter still in her hand. The thought that her father might have concealed the Duke's messages gnawed at her until she could scarcely breathe. By the time she reached Harcourt House, she was shaking. That evening, she confronted him. He sat before the fire, reading glasses perched on his nose, his expression tired but guarded. "Where have you been?" he asked mildly. "With the Duke," she said. The paper slipped from his fingers. "You had no business there." "Nor you," she said coldly, "in my correspondence." The silence between them was sharp. Then his mouth thinned. "You were a child. You knew nothing of the world's cruelties. I did what I thought best. You lied to me. I protected you," he snapped. "From ruin. The Duke was as good as dead. What future could he have offered you? You would have waited forever for a man who would not return. But he did return." Her voice trembled. "And now I must live with the ashes of a life you burned before it began." He looked away, guilt flickering like a candle in wind. "I thought time would cure you." "Time does not cure what is buried alive," she said, her throat tightening. "It only teaches it to haunt you." When she left him, she felt neither triumph nor peace, only exhaustion. In her chamber, she unpinned her hair and let it fall, the weight of it heavy against her neck. The night was still. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on her dressing table. She thought of the Duke's words, *attend the ball*, and of the eyes that would follow her there. To face him again, before all of London, would mean reopening every wound. And yet, for the first time in years, something within her stirred, not hope exactly, but the fragile ghost of it. She rose and crossed to her window. Beyond the garden, the city lights shimmered faintly through mist, 1,000 indifferent stars. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass, eyes closing. If what he said was true, then her past had been stolen. But perhaps, just perhaps, the future was still hers to claim. Behind her, a sound broke the quiet, a soft tap as if something had brushed against the door. She turned sharply. No one stood there, but on the threshold lay another envelope, identical to the first. Her pulse faltered. This one bore only 3 words: he should not know. The night the Duke of Ashworth confessed his sins, rain hammered against the stone walls of Harcourt Manor like a warning from heaven itself. Isabella stood before him, trembling, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of his silence. The fire in the hearth had long since dimmed, its last embers dying as if unwilling to bear witness. He had come to her unannounced, drenched from the storm, his cravat undone, the proud crest on his cloak muddied beyond recognition. Yet his eyes, those same blue eyes she had once dreamt of beneath her pillow, held the grief of a man undone by love and guilt alike. "I should have died there," he said, voice hoarse. "It would have been kinder to you." Her breath caught. 4 years she had imagined their reunion, rehearsed it within the secret theater of her heart, sometimes tender, sometimes furious, but never like this. Never so fragile. The Duke who had once stood tall in white regimentals now seemed haunted by his own flesh, as if each breath carried the ghosts of the men he had buried. "You presume too much," Isabella whispered, though her tone wavered. "Death is no kindness, your grace. It is an escape." His lips quirked into something that was not quite a smile. "Then perhaps I am a coward for surviving." There it was again, that wordless ache between them, the space where love had once bloomed before being scorched by absence and rumor. The world outside might have celebrated his return, but within the walls of her heart there was no parade, only questions. She wanted to hate him for leaving, for letting her grow old in mourning before her time. Yet the sight of him, broken, alive, stirred the same reckless tenderness she had buried beneath layers of propriety. "Do you think," she said, taking a slow step toward him, "that your scars make you less deserving of love?" He met her gaze then, and for the briefest moment, the soldier vanished. "No, Isabella. I think they make me dangerous to those who give it." The air thickened with unspoken things. A clock ticked softly in the corner, marking the seconds of their undoing. She had thought herself prepared for this conversation, yet his presence shattered every composure she had built since his supposed death. He looked at her not as a lady to be courted, but as a confession he could no longer suppress. "Do you know," he murmured, stepping closer, "what thought kept me alive when musket balls sang past my head? It was your voice. The way you once said my name, quietly, as if it were a prayer. I carried it with me, through mud and blood and the sound of dying men." Her throat tightened. "And yet you never wrote." "I did," he said, almost desperate. 100 times. Letters that were never sent. I feared you would not wish to hear from a man who had become half a monster." She laughed bitterly, tears bright in her eyes. "And so you let me believe you dead. Do you know what it is to mourn the living, Ashworth? To watch every dawn arrive and curse it for reminding you he is gone." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I cannot atone for your pain," he said softly. "But I can beg your truth. Do you still love me, Isabella?" The question fell between them like a blade. She wanted to say no, to end this torment, to preserve what little pride remained, but the lie would not pass her lips. Instead, she turned toward the window where rain blurred the reflection of her own face, pale and fragile. "Love," she said. "Love is not what remains after silence. It is what dies because of it." He flinched, but did not look away. "Then tell me how to begin again." Her heart wavered. "You cannot. Not here. Not now. Society watches every step I take. To forgive you would be to ruin myself." He took another step closer, his breath trembling. "Then ruin yourself with me." It was madness. It was everything she had feared and longed for. His words were both salvation and curse. Yet before she could speak, the heavy door burst open. Lady Harcourt, her mother, stood there, wrapped in her shawl, eyes sharp as a dagger. "So it is true," she hissed. "The prodigal Duke returns, and my daughter forgets her place." Isabella froze. "Mother!" "Silence," Lady Harcourt snapped. "Do you think I will allow this spectacle? The ton will devour you. Your name, your father's title, dragged through filth because you cannot restrain your sentiment." Ashworth bowed stiffly. "Madam, I mean no dishonor." "Then you are a fool," she retorted. "A man without lands for half a decade, without repute. You think your war stories make you noble? They make you pitted. And pity is not fit company for a Harcourt." Her words cut like glass. Isabella's fingers trembled, but she held her ground. "Mother, please. I am no child." Lady Harcourt's gaze burned into her. "You are a woman with one chance left to preserve her standing. Do not throw it to the wolves." The Duke's jaw tightened, his eyes dark. "If wolves come, madam, it will be because I called them." Silence fell. Rain filled the gap where civility had once lived. Lady Harcourt's face paled. "You will leave this house," she said coldly, "before the servants speak of what they have seen." He looked at Isabella, helpless and raw. She turned away before her resolve could crumble. "Go," she whispered. "Please." And so he did, his boots echoing down the marble hall, fading into the storm. When the door closed, Lady Harcourt exhaled sharply, her voice trembling despite her cruelty. "You think this is love, Isabella? This is ruin." Isabella said nothing. She only stared into the dying fire, where one stubborn flame refused to surrender. That night, when all had gone to sleep, she found beneath her window a single object, a folded scrap of parchment, sealed with the Duke's crest. Her hands shook as she opened it. There was no apology, no plea. Only 5 words, written with trembling ink. "I would wait forever, still." And as she read them, the rain ceased. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. For in her heart, she knew, the war between love and duty had only just begun. The scandal broke at dawn. By the time Lady Isabella Harcourt opened her eyes, London already knew. Every whisper that once slumbered in drawing-rooms now danced through the streets like fire. The Duke of Ashworth had been seen leaving Harcourt Manor after midnight, his carriage halted at the gates by watchmen who swore the lady's candle still burned in her chamber window. By breakfast, the Tun had christened her the fallen angel of Grosvenor Square. Her mother's shriek echoed through the manor. "You have doomed us all," she cried, the newspaper trembling in her jeweled hand. "There will be no invitations, no proposals, no redemption." Isabella stood silent by the window, hands clasped before her, as if still praying for a mercy long denied. She knew every word her mother spoke was true. One midnight visit, one moment of unguarded honesty, had shattered everything that propriety demanded she protect. But worse than her mother's fury was the silence of the Duke. 3 days had passed since that night. No message, no word. Only the cruel hum of society's appetite devouring her name. "I loved him," Isabella whispered, almost to herself. "If that is a crime, then let the world hang me for it." Lady Harcourt froze, her eyes narrowing with the cold precision of a blade. "You think love excuses disgrace? Then you are indeed your father's daughter." The words landed heavy, sharper than any insult. 4 years, her father's memory had been forbidden. His debts, his ruin, his scandalous affair with a married countess. Isabella had sworn she would never repeat his folly. And now she had done worse. By evening, every servant in the house avoided her eyes. The candlelight in the corridors dimmed earlier than usual, as if the very walls refused to be complicit. And yet, in the smallest corner of her heart, something glowed, a quiet defiance. When the knock came, it was near midnight again. Soft, urgent, unmistakable. Her pulse stuttered. Without hesitation, she crossed the cold marble floor and opened the door. The Duke stood there. Rain clung to his shoulders, his hair darker from the storm, but his eyes, those sorrowful eyes, were steady. "Isabella," he breathed, "I have come to end this." Her lips trembled. "To end what? My ruin or your silence?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Both," he said simply. "You must leave London. Tonight." She blinked. "Leave? Are you mad? They will destroy you. Already the prince's circle laughs behind closed doors. They call you—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "You deserve none of it. I can protect you still, if you come with me to Ashworth Hall. We will marry before the banns can be questioned." She recoiled as if struck. "Marry? Under pity's shadow? I would rather face ruin than be your charity." His voice broke. "Charity? You think I offer you that? I offer you my name, Isabella. My life. And yet you hid for days while they dragged mine through the mud." He took a step closer, desperate. "Because I was securing your future. I spoke with the king's aid this morning. My commission stands to be renewed, my lands restored. I can make this right, but only if you trust me." Her chest ached. "Trust," she whispered. "You ask that of a woman who once wept over your grave? For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he reached into his coat and drew out a small, battered box. "This was yours," he said. "It was found on the field near Salamanca. I have carried it ever since." She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay a lock of her own hair, one she had cut and sent to him years ago, wrapped in a silk ribbon. It was stained, faded, but still whole. Her composure crumbled. "Why did you come back?" He exhaled slowly. "Because every time I closed my eyes I saw your face. Because I could not die without hearing you forgive me. Because love, damn it, Isabella, love is not a virtue. It is a curse, and I bear it gladly." Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. "You speak as if this love absolves us. It will not. Tomorrow the papers will print our names together. By dawn, I will be the cautionary tale whispered at every ball." "Then let them whisper," he said fiercely. "Let them choke on it." For the first time in years, she saw the soldier again, the man who had charged into cannon fire without fear. And she realized with a pang that his defiance had not survived war unscarred. It had simply changed its battlefield. A sound broke through their standoff, the echo of boots in the hall. Servants. Her mother. The house stirred. "Go," Isabella whispered urgently. "If they see you." He seized her hand. "Then come with me now. Before it's too late." "I cannot." "You must." "I cannot," she repeated, voice trembling. "If I go, they will say I ran away in guilt. If I stay, they will say I was abandoned again. But at least I will have chosen." He looked at her, shattered by the calm in her tone. "Then this is the end?" She smiled faintly, though her tears betrayed her. "No, my lord. This is the beginning of your penance." He stared at her for a long, suspended moment, then bent his head and kissed her hand, slow and reverent, as though sealing a vow neither dared speak aloud. "You will not be forgotten," he murmured. "Not by me." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, he was gone. Only the faint scent of rain remained. Morning came with no mercy. The scandal had reached the palace. Lady Harcourt's carriage stood waiting, ready to escort her daughter to a distant cousin's estate in Bath, a polite exile disguised as rest. Isabella did not argue. As she stepped into the carriage, she glanced back once at the manor gates, where the Duke's seal still lingered in the soft wax of the previous night's note. The road stretched before her, grey and endless. She felt hollow, yet strangely unburdened. Her ruin had become her freedom. And then, just as the carriage turned onto the main road, a rider appeared from the mist. His horse thundered forward, wild and breathless. He halted beside her window, his uniform half unfastened, his eyes burning with desperate purpose. "Isabella!" Her breath caught. "Ashworth!" He held out a folded parchment, its seal unbroken, marked with the royal crest. "The king has pardoned us both," he said hoarsely. "Your father's debts, your name restored. They cannot touch you now." For a heartbeat neither moved. Rain began to fall again, softly, almost tenderly. She reached for the letter, but his fingers lingered over hers. "Do not waste this gift," he said. "Live as you were meant to. Free." Her eyes glistened. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I have made peace with ghosts." The carriage began to move again. Their hands slipped apart. She turned once more to look back, but the mist had already swallowed him whole. And though she would never see him again, his final words, quiet, steady, unshaken, echoed through her soul like a vow reborn in rain. "I waited my whole life for you,